Have you ever noticed that some periods of life seem to attract one problem after another? Not necessarily major disasters, but interruptions, misunderstandings, delays, tension, unexpected setbacks. It's as if something invisible keeps pulling you into the same kind of experience, even when you're trying to move forward. And the strange part is that, looking back, you can often feel it before it happens. A certain emotional atmosphere appears first, then reality seems to follow. What if the chaos you've been experiencing isn't arriving from outside at all? What if it's being sustained by something so familiar that you've stopped noticing it? Most people spend years trying to fix the symptoms while unknowingly feeding the source. And once you see the pattern, you begin to realize that some of the thoughts, emotions, and reactions you've considered normal may be influencing far more than you ever imagined. The question is, if chaos has a frequency, what exactly have you been broadcasting without realizing it? There is a common misunderstanding whenever people hear the word frequency. They imagine something mystical, distant, or invisible, as if it belongs to another dimension. But the frequency that shapes most people's lives is often much simpler than that. It is the emotional and psychological atmosphere they return to every day. The thoughts they rehearse. The expectations they carry. The reactions they repeat so often that they no longer question them. Think about someone who wakes up already expecting complications. Before anything has happened, their mind is scanning for what might go wrong. Traffic, bad news, disappointment, conflict. They aren't consciously choosing chaos. In fact, they usually want peace more than anyone. Yet their attention has become trained to search for instability long before instability arrives. What's fascinating is that this pattern rarely feels dramatic from the inside. It feels normal, familiar, reasonable. Most people don't wake up thinking, "Today I will feed chaos." They simply continue conversations in their minds that started years ago. Old worries, old fears, old predictions, old emotional habits. The frequency becomes invisible precisely because it has become familiar. You may have noticed periods when life felt heavier than usual. During those times, even neutral events seemed irritating. A delayed message felt personal. A small mistake felt significant. A simple disagreement felt like proof that something was wrong. The external world hadn't necessarily changed, but the internal filter through which you were viewing it had. Hidden beneath this is a truth most people overlook. Your repeated emotional state becomes the lens through which reality is interpreted. Two people can experience the exact same event and walk away with completely different conclusions. One sees evidence of failure, the other sees information. One sees a problem, the other sees a lesson. The event remains identical. The frequency does not. This is why chaos often feels self-reinforcing. Once the mind settles into a particular emotional atmosphere, it begins collecting evidence to justify it. Not because reality is conspiring against you, but because perception naturally searches for consistency. The mind prefers being right about its fears more than it likes being surprised by possibility. And perhaps you've experienced something even stranger. A period when you felt restless, unsettled, emotionally scattered, and suddenly life seemed to mirror that state back to you. More confusion appeared. More uncertainty surfaced. More unresolved situations demanded attention. It almost felt as if reality was responding to something you weren't consciously saying. But if this frequency is being transmitted through ordinary thoughts, emotions, expectations, and reactions, then an even more important question emerges. If chaos can be fed unintentionally, how exactly are people strengthening it every single day without realizing they're doing it? Most people assume chaos enters their lives through external events. A difficult relationship, financial pressure, unexpected setbacks, stressful circumstances. And while those things certainly exist, they often overlook the countless ways they continue feeding chaos long after the original event has passed. Consider what happens after a single negative experience. A conversation goes badly. A plan falls apart. Someone disappoints you. The event lasts minutes, maybe hours. Yet the mind can replay it for days. sometimes weeks, sometimes weeks, sometimes weeks. 3 is the experience ends. But the emotional energy surrounding it continues to circulate long after reality has moved on. This is one of the most common ways chaos survives. Not through what happened, but through how often it is revisited. Every replay feels like preparation. Every mental rehearsal feels useful. Yet many people are unknowingly reliving situations that no longer exist, keeping their nervous system connected to realities that have already passed. The same pattern appears in constant worry. Worry often disguises itself as responsibility. It feels productive. It feels intelligent. It feels like preparation. But most worry never solves anything. Instead, it trains the mind to become increasingly familiar with worst-case scenarios. Over time, uncertainty itself begins to feel threatening. Then there is the endless consumption of negativity. News cycles built around outrage. Social media designed to trigger emotional reactions. Stories that reinforce fear, division, and catastrophe. A person may spend hours each day absorbing signals of instability without realizing how deeply those signals influence their internal atmosphere. Something subtle happens after enough exposure. The mind begins expecting disruption. It starts anticipating disappointment before opportunities, problems before solutions, threats before possibilities. Not because reality has objectively become worse, but because attention has been conditioned toward a particular interpretation of reality. Old conflicts create another hidden source of fuel. You may be driving, showering, or trying to fall asleep when an argument from months ago suddenly returns. The body reacts as though it is happening again. The emotions become real again. The tension becomes real again. A memory transforms into a present experience. What makes this especially powerful is that the nervous system doesn't always distinguish between what is happening and what is being vividly imagined. The emotional response can be remarkably similar, which means a person can spend entire days physically safe while psychologically living inside imagined threats, remembered conflicts, and anticipated disasters. And that raises a deeper mystery. If the body reacts to imagined chaos almost as strongly as real chaos, then where exactly is the boundary between the world outside you and the world your mind is continuously creating within? Imagine receiving a message from someone important to you. The wording feels slightly different than usual. Nothing alarming is actually written there, yet within seconds your mind begins constructing possibilities. Maybe they're upset. Maybe something is wrong. Maybe you've done something. Before long, your body is carrying the weight of an event that hasn't even happened. This is one of the strangest features of human experience. The body often responds not to reality itself, but to the meaning the mind assigns to reality. A thought can accelerate the heartbeat. An imagined scenario can create tension in the muscles. A future event that does not yet exist can influence your mood in the present moment. For thousands of years, this ability helped human beings survive. Anticipating danger increased the chances of avoiding it. The nervous system evolved to react quickly because hesitation could be costly. But the modern mind often applies the same survival mechanism to situations that are not life-threatening. A conversation, an email, a possibility, a fear. The hidden problem is repetition. A single fearful thought is rarely powerful enough to shape your entire state. But repeated daily, week after week, month after month, it begins creating a familiar emotional environment. The body learns the pattern. The mind learns the pattern. Eventually, anxiety no longer feels like a temporary reaction. It starts feeling like reality itself. You've probably experienced this without realizing it. You worried intensely about something for days, only to discover that none of your fears actually happened. Yet during those days, your emotions were real. Your stress was real. Your exhaustion was real. Your body paid the price for an event that existed only inside your imagination. This is why some people feel trapped in cycles they cannot explain. They believe they're responding to life, when in many cases they're responding to mental simulations of life. Their nervous system is constantly preparing for storms that never arrive. And because the preparation feels real, the chaos feels real too. There is a profound irony here. The mind creates fearful predictions in an attempt to gain control. Yet the more attention those predictions receive, the less control a person often feels. What begins as protection slowly becomes a prison. The very mechanism designed to keep you safe can start convincing you that danger is everywhere. And once you see that your inner world can influence what feels real, another question naturally emerges. If the mind is constantly filtering reality through expectation, fear, memory, and attention, then how much of what you experience each day is actually being shaped by where your attention goes? Walk into a crowded room and decide to look for people wearing blue. Within moments, blue seems to appear everywhere, not because more blue suddenly exists, but because your attention has instructed your perception what to notice. What was previously invisible becomes obvious almost instantly. The same principle operates far beyond colors. Attention acts like a spotlight moving across an enormous landscape of possibilities. Whatever falls inside that beam becomes vivid, meaningful, and emotionally significant. Everything outside it fades into the background, even if it is equally present. This explains why two people can live in the same city, work similar jobs, and experience completely different realities. One notices betrayal, incompetence, and disappointment wherever they go. The other notices opportunities, kindness, and unexpected possibilities. Neither is necessarily wrong. They're simply looking through different filters. Most people assume they see reality objectively, but attention is always selecting, always editing, always prioritizing. Out of thousands of daily details, only a small fraction reach conscious awareness. The question is not whether you have a filter. The question is what your filter has been trained to find. Think about periods when life felt overwhelmingly difficult. During those times, even small inconveniences seemed to confirm that everything was going wrong. A cancelled plan became proof of bad luck. A mistake became proof of failure. A criticism became proof of inadequacy. The spotlight narrowed until it illuminated only what supported the existing emotional state. Now consider the opposite. Have you ever entered a season where unexpected opportunities seemed to appear everywhere? Helpful conversations, timely coincidences, new ideas, new connections. It wasn't necessarily because the world had transformed overnight. Often, your attention had expanded enough to finally notice possibilities that had always been there. This doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending everything is perfect. In fact, genuine clarity requires seeing reality as accurately as possible. But accuracy becomes impossible when attention is trapped in a constant search for threats. A mind trained only to detect danger will eventually find danger, even where little exists. And here lies one of the most important realizations of all. Every moment of attention is a form of energy investment. Whatever receives your sustained focus grows stronger within your experience. Which leads to a difficult but liberating question. If attention is constantly feeding something, what would happen if you stopped feeding the patterns you no longer want to live inside? Most people assume transformation begins by adding something new. A new habit, a new belief, a new technique, a new way of thinking. But often the first real shift happens in the opposite direction. It begins with subtraction. Imagine a fire that has been burning for years. You don't need to fight the flames directly. You don't need to argue with them or force them to disappear. You simply stop providing fuel. Eventually, what seemed powerful begins weakening on its own. The same principle quietly operates within the mind. Many people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to create peace while remaining deeply connected to the very things that generate chaos. They want clarity while consuming confusion. They want calm while immersing themselves in constant outrage. They want confidence while repeatedly exposing themselves to sources that reinforce doubt. The hidden truth is that not everything deserves your attention. Some conversations leave you drained every time. Some environments pull you back into old versions of yourself. Some forms of entertainment train your nervous system to expect conflict, fear, and instability as normal conditions of life. You may have noticed this after spending time with certain people. You leave the interaction carrying emotions that weren't even yours when the conversation began. Suddenly you're worrying about things you weren't worried about before, thinking about problems that didn't exist an hour earlier. The atmosphere of another person's inner world becomes contagious. The same phenomenon occurs with information. Most people underestimate how deeply repeated exposure shapes perception. What enters your mind daily begins influencing what feels normal, what feels possible, and what feels likely. Over time, your internal landscape starts resembling whatever you consistently consume. What's fascinating is that the first signs of change are often subtle. Nothing dramatic happens. The external world remains largely the same, yet there is slightly more space between a thought and your reaction to it. Slightly more silence beneath the noise. Slightly more awareness before old patterns take control. And that space changes everything. Because once you stop feeding chaos, something unexpected begins to emerge from underneath it. Not instant happiness. Not constant positivity. Something far more valuable. Clarity. And most people don't realize how powerful clarity is until they finally experience it. Clarity is often misunderstood. People imagine it as having all the answers, knowing exactly what to do, seeing the future with certainty. But real clarity feels very different. It is the ability to remain present without being pulled in every direction by every thought, fear, or emotional impulse that appears. Think about a lake during a storm. When the surface is constantly disturbed, it becomes impossible to see what lies beneath. Reflections become distorted. Shapes become unclear. The water itself hasn't lost its depth. It has simply lost its stillness. The human mind operates in much the same way. Many people spend years searching for answers when what they actually need is less noise. Their lives become crowded with opinions, predictions, distractions, and mental chatter. Every question immediately generates 10 more questions. Every uncertainty produces another layer of analysis. The mind becomes so busy that it can no longer hear itself think. You've probably experienced moments when clarity appeared unexpectedly, perhaps during a quiet walk, a long drive, a shower, a few peaceful minutes before sleep. Suddenly a problem that seemed impossible becomes obvious. Not because new information arrived, but because the noise temporarily disappeared. This reveals something important. Clarity is not usually created. More often, it is uncovered. Beneath the worries, beneath the mental rehearsals, beneath the endless internal commentary, there is often a deeper intelligence already processing things more effectively than the conscious mind realizes. One of the most powerful shifts occurs when you learn to observe thoughts rather than immediately becoming them. A fearful thought appears, but instead of following it into another imagined future, you simply notice it. An anxious prediction arrives, but you resist the urge to build an entire reality around it. The thought passes. The awareness remains. At first, this feels almost unnatural. Most people have spent their entire lives reacting automatically. Thought becomes emotion. Emotion becomes action. Action creates consequence. The cycle happens so quickly that it appears inevitable. Yet the moment awareness enters the process, new possibilities emerge. And here is where the deeper transformation begins. Because as clarity grows, something else starts changing as well. Certain emotions that once felt distant begin returning naturally. Curiosity, appreciation, trust, purpose. Not because you're forcing them into existence, but because the signal beneath the noise is finally becoming easier to hear. Most people think emotions are simply reactions to life. Something good happens, and you feel grateful. Something exciting happens, and you feel inspired. Something meaningful happens, and you feel hopeful. But what if the relationship works both ways? What if certain emotions don't just respond to your experience, but actively shape the way you experience reality? Consider gratitude. Not the forced version people perform because they think they should, but genuine appreciation. The kind that appears unexpectedly when you notice something you've been overlooking. A friendship, a quiet morning, a lesson hidden inside a difficult chapter. In those moments, nothing external may have changed. Yet the entire atmosphere of experience feels different. The hidden truth is that gratitude alters attention. Instead of searching for what is missing, the mind begins noticing what is present. Instead of scanning for threats, it becomes capable of recognizing support. The world itself may be unchanged, but the reality being perceived starts shifting in subtle ways. Curiosity creates a similar effect. Fear closes perception. Curiosity opens it. When something unexpected happens, fear immediately asks, "What if this goes wrong?" Curiosity asks, "What is this trying to show me?" The event remains the same, but the doorway through which you enter it changes completely. You've probably seen this in your own life. There were moments when uncertainty felt terrifying, and other moments when uncertainty felt exciting. The circumstances may have been surprisingly similar, yet the emotional lens transformed the entire experience. One state generated contraction, the other generated possibility. Confidence operates differently than most people imagine as well. Real confidence is not certainty that everything will work out. It is trust in your ability to face whatever happens. This distinction matters, because people who trust themselves don't need reality to be perfectly predictable. They remain stable even when life becomes unpredictable. Purpose has perhaps the strongest influence of all. When people lose connection to purpose, even small obstacles feel exhausting. But when they reconnect with something meaningful, their relationship with difficulty changes. Challenges that once seemed unbearable become part of a larger journey. The external struggle remains. The internal interpretation transforms. What makes these emotions so powerful is that they influence decisions, behavior, perception, and attention simultaneously. They create entirely different patterns of action. And eventually, those actions begin producing different outcomes. Not because the universe is rewarding a particular emotional state, but because a different signal is now guiding your choices. Yet there is one final obstacle that prevents many people from fully changing their lives. They begin thinking differently. They start feeling differently, but their actions remain tied to the same old fears. And this is where the deepest alignment becomes necessary. There comes a moment when insight alone is no longer enough. You may recognize your patterns. You may understand how attention shapes perception. You may even notice yourself becoming calmer, clearer, and more intentional. But eventually life asks a question that cannot be answered with thought alone. It asks, will your actions follow where your awareness has gone? This is where many people become stuck. They begin imagining a different future while continuing to behave exactly as they did before. They think about confidence while acting from hesitation. They think about abundance while making decisions from scarcity. They think about connection while remaining emotionally unavailable. The contradiction is often invisible at first. After all, changing your thinking feels significant. And it is. But reality tends to respond more strongly to repeated behavior than occasional insight. The body believes what it repeatedly does. The mind believes what it repeatedly experiences. Action turns possibility into evidence. Think about someone who says they want peace, yet spends every day engaging with drama. Or someone who wants freedom but continues making decisions based entirely on fear. They may genuinely desire a different reality, but their daily actions keep reinforcing the old one. The signal becomes mixed. One part of them moves forward while another remains anchored in the past. You may have experienced this yourself during periods of transition. Part of you knew something needed to change. You could feel it. Yet every familiar habit seemed to pull you back toward the person you used to be. Not because you lacked intelligence or awareness, but because old actions carry momentum. This is why alignment feels so powerful when it finally happens. A thought points in one direction. An emotion supports it. A decision reinforces it. and action confirms it. Suddenly there is less internal conflict, less friction, less energy wasted moving in opposite directions at the same time. What's fascinating is that these changes often begin with surprisingly small choices. A conversation you finally have, a boundary you finally establish, an opportunity you finally accept, a habit you finally release. The action itself may appear minor from the outside, yet internally, it sends a powerful message. A different reality is no longer being imagined. It is being lived. And when thought, emotion, and action begin moving together, something remarkable starts happening. The chaotic signal weakens. A more coherent one takes its place. People often describe this as life becoming easier, but that isn't quite accurate. Something else is occurring. Something that becomes visible only after chaos is no longer being constantly fed. One of the most surprising discoveries people make is that reality doesn't necessarily become perfect when chaos loses its grip. Problems do not disappear. Uncertainty does not vanish. Life remains unpredictable. Yet something undeniably changes. The same world begins to feel different because the person experiencing it is different. At first, the shift is almost too subtle to notice. You react less impulsively. Situations that once consumed your attention for days now pass through your awareness more quickly. Small frustrations lose their ability to dominate an entire afternoon. The emotional storms still appear, but they no longer control the weather of your inner world. Then other changes begin emerging. Decisions become clearer. Not because every option suddenly becomes obvious, but because the noise that once drowned out your intuition becomes quieter. You spend less time trapped between endless possibilities and more time moving forward with quiet conviction. Relationships often change as well. Some become stronger. Others fade naturally. This can feel confusing at first. But when your internal frequency shifts, the dynamics around you often shift too. Certain conversations no longer interest you. Certain conflicts no longer attract you. Certain patterns that once felt normal begin feeling strangely out of place. Many people describe an increase in meaningful coincidences during this stage. Unexpected encounters, helpful opportunities, timely information arriving at exactly the right moment. It can feel as though reality has suddenly become more responsive. Yet perhaps what has changed is not reality itself, but your ability to notice what was previously hidden beneath distraction and emotional noise. There is a profound difference between living in survival mode and living in awareness. Survival mode narrows perception. It focuses almost entirely on avoiding danger. Awareness expands perception. It allows you to recognize possibilities that fear would never let you see. The opportunities may have always existed, but now you are finally available to them. This is why people often say their luck improved when their inner state changed. In many cases, luck is not the most accurate word. What improved was perception. What improved was perception. What improved was decision-making. What improved was emotional stability. And those changes quietly influenced countless outcomes that once seemed random. The hidden truth is that reality is always responding to the signal you continuously reinforce. Not in a magical sense. Not because the universe is keeping score, but because your attention, emotions, interpretations, and actions shape the way you move through the world every single day. Change the signal, and gradually the experience changes too. And perhaps that is the realization waiting beneath everything we've explored. The chaos you feared was never the entire story. The frequency was never fixed. The signal was never permanent. It has been changing all along. And maybe the reason this message found you now is because some part of you was already beginning to hear a different signal emerging beneath the noise. If you've made it this far, you may be realizing that chaos is not always something that happens to us. Sometimes it is something we unknowingly participate in, not through weakness, not through failure, but through patterns that became so familiar we stopped seeing them. Thoughts repeated thousands of times. Emotions rehearsed until they felt like facts. Reactions that quietly shaped the atmosphere of our lives. The deeper realization is that you don't have to fight chaos to transform your experience. You don't have to control every outcome. You don't have to predict every possibility. Sometimes the greatest shift begins when you stop feeding what drains you and start giving your attention to what brings clarity, meaning, and direction. The signal changes, then slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the world you experience begins changing with it. Maybe that's why certain chapters of your life now feel complete. Maybe that's why old patterns no longer fit the person you're becoming. Maybe that's why you've been sensing that something is changing beneath the surface. Not because reality suddenly transformed overnight, but because your relationship with reality is evolving. And if there is one thing worth remembering, it is this: every moment of awareness creates a new choice. Every choice strengthens a signal. Every signal shapes a path. You are not trapped inside the frequency you've been carrying. You are participating in its creation, which means you can also participate in its transformation. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing and joining us for future explorations of the hidden patterns shaping human experience. If you found value in this video, a simple like helps this message reach others who may need it at exactly the right moment. And I'd love to hear from you. In the comments, write the single word: clarity. Not for me, for yourself, as a quiet reminder of the signal you want to strengthen moving forward. Because sometimes transformation doesn't begin when life changes. Sometimes it begins the moment you finally notice what you've been feeding all along.